13-year-old Emma sat in her room, staring at the ceiling, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't escape. Middle school was supposed to be fun, but lately it had become a nightmare. Emma had always been quiet, preferring the company of books to people, but this year felt different. The whispers, the snickers in the hallways, and the subtle glances made her feel like she was under a microscope. Her best friend, Lily, seemed to be drifting away, pulled into a new group of friends who were louder, more popular. Emma felt like she was losing her only anchor. At home, her parents were always busy, caught up in their own world of work and responsibilities. They didn't notice the shadows under Emma's eyes or the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was watching. One day, after a particularly rough day at school, Emma couldn't hold it in anymore. She rushed home, tears blurring her vision, and collapsed onto her bed. She clutched her pillow, trying to muffle the sobs that racked her body. It wasn't just the bullying, it was the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, and the fear that things would never get better. The next morning, Emma woke up feeling hollow, her energy drained. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back at her. But as she stared at her reflection, something inside her shifted. She was tired of being the girl who let everything happen to her. She wanted to change, to take control of her life. That day, instead of hiding in the corner, Emma forced herself to sit at the lunch table with some classmates she barely knew. She started small, asking about homework and classes. To her surprise, they welcomed her, and soon she found herself laughing at a joke someone told. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Emma began to reach out more. She joined a book club at the local library, where she met other kids who shared her love for reading. She also started talking to her parents, sharing what she was going through. They were surprised but supportive, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was truly being heard. As the school year went on, the bullying didn't stop completely, but Emma found strength in the friendships she was building. She learned to stand up for herself, and more importantly, she learned that it was okay to ask for help. By the end of the year, Emma had changed. She wasn't just the quiet girl anymore. She was strong, resilient, and most importantly, she was happy. The struggle had been tough, but it had taught her something valuable, that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. 15-year-old Alex Thompson was an ordinary teenager living in the bustling city of New York. He loved video games, basketball, and hanging out with his friends. But his life took an unexpected turn one evening when he accidentally stumbled upon a secret that would change everything. It all started when Alex was exploring an abandoned warehouse near his school. He had heard rumors that it was a hideout for a local gang, but he was more interested in the thrill of exploring. Inside, he discovered a hidden room with high-tech equipment, encrypted files, and a mysterious briefcase. As he examined the briefcase, it suddenly beeped and opened, revealing a sleek, high-tech gadget and a flash drive with a top-secret logo. Just as he was trying to figure out what it was, a group of masked operatives burst into the room. Alex quickly hid behind some crates, trying to stay out of sight. The operatives were speaking in hushed tones about a dangerous plot involving a stolen prototype that could cause massive destruction if it fell into the wrong hands. Alex's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to follow them as they left the warehouse. He trailed them to a luxurious skyscraper and watched as they entered through a secure entrance. Alex knew he needed to act quickly. Using the gadget from the briefcase, which turned out to be a state-of-the-art grappling hook, he scaled the side of the building and found an open window. Inside, Alex navigated through the high-tech security systems using the gadget's scanning functions. He discovered that the operatives were part of a covert organization called the Shadow Operatives, known for their high-stakes heists and espionage missions. Their current mission was to steal a prototype energy device from a top-secret research lab. Realizing the potential danger if the device was stolen, Alex decided to intervene. He used the gadget to disable the lab's security systems and, with his knowledge of the building's layout from his earlier exploration, he managed to sneak into the research lab. As he was about to secure the prototype, the operatives arrived, led by a menacing figure known only as the Phantom. A high-stakes chase ensued through the labyrinthine corridors of the skyscraper. Alex used his agility and quick thinking to outmaneuver the operatives, using the grappling hook to swing across gaps and evade capture. Finally, Alex reached the rooftop, where a helicopter awaited the Phantom and his team. In a daring move, Alex managed to confront the Phantom and recover the prototype. The helicopter began to lift off, but Alex, using his newfound skills, was able to launch a net from the gadget to ensnare the helicopter's landing gear, forcing it to the ground. With the help of the city's police, who had been alerted by Alex's earlier hacking of the building's security systems, the Phantom and his operatives were arrested, and the prototype was safely returned to the research facility. Alex returned to his normal life, but he knew he could never go back to just being an ordinary teenager. He had uncovered a world of high-stakes espionage and danger and had proven himself as an unexpected hero. The gadget, now a memento of his adventure, was safely tucked away in his room, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures start with a simple curiosity and a willingness to take risks. 16-year-old Zoe had always felt like she didn't quite fit in. Her adventurous spirit and love for exploration often set her apart from her peers. So when she stumbled upon an old map in her grandfather's attic, she saw it as an opportunity for the adventure she had always dreamed of. The map was yellowed with age and marked with a series of cryptic symbols and a path leading into a dense forest on the edge of town. The legend written on the map told of an enchanted forest filled with magical creatures, hidden treasures, and ancient secrets. Zoe's heart raced with excitement as she imagined what lay beyond the forest's edge. On a sunny Saturday morning, Zoe decided it was the perfect day to embark on her adventure. She packed a backpack with essentials: water, snacks, a compass, a flashlight, and her trusty multi-tool, and set out for the forest. As she entered the forest, the trees towered above her, their leaves creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, green glow. The air was filled with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. Zoe followed the path marked on the map, which wound through the trees and led deeper into the forest. After an hour of hiking, Zoe reached a clearing where the map indicated a hidden entrance. The entrance was an archway made of intertwining branches and vines. Zoe pushed her way through and found herself in a magical glade, unlike anything she had ever seen. The glade was bathed in a golden light, and sparkling flowers and glowing mushrooms dotted the landscape. As she explored the glade, Zoe came across a shimmering pool of water at its center. The water was crystal clear, and she could see strange, luminescent fish swimming beneath the surface. Beside the pool stood a large, ancient tree with a door carved into its trunk. Zoe approached the tree and carefully opened the door. Inside, she found a staircase spiraling down into the earth. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, she descended the stairs, which led to an underground chamber filled with glittering crystals and ancient artifacts. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal holding a golden amulet. The amulet was engraved with symbols that matched those on the map. As Zoe reached for it, she heard a soft voice echo through the chamber. It was the voice of a guardian spirit, warning her of the trials ahead. The spirit explained that the amulet was a key to unlocking the true power of the enchanted forest, but it could only be claimed by someone who proved their worth through a series of challenges. Zoe, determined to see her adventure through, accepted the challenge. The first trial was a test of courage. Zoe had to navigate through a maze of shifting walls and hidden traps. Her heart raced as she carefully made her way through, using her instincts and the clues on the map to find the correct path. The second trial was a test of wisdom. Zoe encountered a riddle spoken by an ancient stone statue. After some contemplation, she solved the riddle and was rewarded with a magical compass that would guide her through the final trial. The last trial was a test of compassion. Zoe came across a wounded creature, a small, mystical fox with shimmering fur. Despite her fear of the unknown, she gently tended to the fox's wounds and helped it regain its strength. In return, the fox revealed a hidden passage that led to the heart of the forest. Sophia, a 19-year-old college student, had just moved into her first apartment. It was a small, cozy place with just enough room for her and her cat, Luna. The apartment was perfect, except for one thing, a large, ornate mirror that had been left behind by the previous tenant. The mirror was old, with a heavy, gilded frame that seemed out of place in the modern apartment. Despite feeling a bit uneasy about it, Sophia decided to keep the mirror, thinking it added a touch of vintage charm to her new home. One evening, as Sophia was getting ready for bed, she noticed something strange in the mirror. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. She quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. Shaking it off as a trick of the light, she climbed into bed and drifted off to sleep. That night, Sophia was plagued by unsettling dreams. In them, she was trapped in a dark, cold place, surrounded by whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The whispers grew louder, forming words that she couldn't quite make out. The only thing she could see in the darkness was the reflection of the mirror, glowing faintly with an ominous light. The next morning, Sophia woke up feeling drained, her mind foggy from the restless night. As she passed the mirror, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. There was a faint handprint on the glass, as if someone had pressed their hand against it from the other side. She hesitated, then wiped the glass clean, telling herself it was just a smudge. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences intensified. Every time Sophia looked into the mirror, she saw fleeting glimpses of movement, shadows darting just out of sight. Luna, usually a calm and affectionate cat, started to avoid the mirror, hissing whenever she got too close to it. The dreams became more vivid, with the whispers growing louder, more insistent, and always centered around the mirror. One night, unable to sleep, Sophia decided to confront the mirror. She stood before it, staring into her own reflection, searching for any sign of the strange occurrences that had been haunting her. The room was silent, the only sound her own breathing. Suddenly, the reflection in the mirror began to change. Sophia's face distorted, her eyes growing dark and hollow. The reflection smirked, a sinister grin that didn't match her own expression. Paralyzed with fear, Sophia watched as the reflection reached out from the glass, its hand pressing against the surface, matching where she had seen the handprint before. In a flash, the reflection's hand broke through the glass with a shattering sound, and Sophia felt a cold, icy grip around her wrist. She screamed, trying to pull away, but the reflection's grip was too strong. The room around her began to twist and warp, the walls closing in as the darkness from her dreams seeped into reality. With one final, desperate pull, Sophia managed to wrench herself free, stumbling back and collapsing to the floor. The mirror shattered completely, the glass fragments scattering across the room. Panting, Sophia stared at the remains of the mirror, half expecting the reflection to emerge from the broken shards. But the room was silent, and the oppressive darkness began to lift. Luna cautiously approached her, nuzzling her hand as if to reassure her that the nightmare was over. Sophia spent the rest of the night cleaning up the broken glass, too afraid to sleep. The next day, she took the shattered remains of the mirror to the trash, not daring to keep even a single piece.
17-year-old Emma had always been drawn to the sea. Living in the coastal town of Clearwater, she spent most of her free time exploring the beaches, diving into the waves and sailing with her father. But there was one place she had always been warned to stay away from: the Island of Shadows. The island was a dark silhouette on the horizon, shrouded in mist and mystery. The locals whispered stories about it, tales of shipwrecks, strange creatures, and people who ventured there but never returned. But Emma wasn't one to be scared off by ghost stories. The more she heard, the more determined she became to uncover the truth. One evening, as she was walking along the pier, Emma noticed a small, weathered boat tied up at the dock. It wasn't much, but it looked seaworthy. On a whim, she decided that tonight was the night. She would set sail for the Island of Shadows and finally see for herself what secrets it held. Under the cover of darkness, Emma untied the boat and pushed off from the dock. The sea was calm, and the full moon lit her way as she navigated toward the island. The closer she got, the thicker the fog became, until she could barely see a few feet in front of her. But Emma pressed on, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. After what felt like hours, the boat's hull scraped against something solid. She had arrived. Emma stepped out onto the shore, the sound of the waves muffled by the dense fog. The island was eerily quiet, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. But Emma wasn't about to turn back now. She began to explore, picking her way through the rocky terrain. The island was unlike anything she had imagined. Twisted trees with gnarled roots, strange plants that seemed to glow in the dark, and an unsettling feeling that she was being watched. But there was something else too, something that drew her deeper into the island. As she ventured further, Emma stumbled upon an old, overgrown path. Following it, she soon found herself standing in front of the remains of an ancient stone structure. It looked like a temple, half buried in the earth, with crumbling pillars and strange symbols carved into the walls. Emma felt a thrill of discovery. This was it, the heart of the island's mystery. She carefully stepped inside, her flashlight illuminating the dark interior. The temple was vast, with high ceilings and long corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. As she explored, Emma discovered strange artifacts, old coins, pieces of jewelry, and fragments of pottery. But the most intriguing find was a large, ornate door at the end of one of the corridors. The door was covered in intricate carvings and had no visible handle or keyhole. But there was something odd about the carvings. They seemed to shift and change as she looked at them, like they were alive. Emma reached out to touch the door, and as soon as her fingers brushed the surface, the carvings began to glow with a faint blue light.
17-year-old Ethan Carter had always been fascinated by ancient myths and legends. His favorite place was the local library, where he often got lost in books about forgotten civilizations and magical artifacts. One evening, while perusing a dusty, old tome in the library's restricted section, he discovered a mysterious journal. It detailed the legend of an artifact known as the Sentinel of Shadows, a powerful object said to control the balance between light and darkness. According to the journal, the Sentinel had been hidden away centuries ago to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. Intrigued by the story, Ethan began to investigate further, piecing together clues from the journal that led him to believe the artifact was hidden somewhere in the city. His quest took him to an old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion, once grand, was now covered in ivy and decay. Ethan used the clues from the journal to navigate through the mansion's dark corridors and hidden rooms. As he explored, he discovered ancient symbols and traps set to deter anyone from finding the Sentinel. Ethan's investigation did not go unnoticed. Unknown to him, a secretive organization known as the Obsidian Order had also been searching for the Sentinel. The Order was a shadowy group determined to use the artifact to plunge the world into darkness and chaos. Ethan's quest led him to a hidden chamber beneath the mansion, where he found the Sentinel of Shadows, a beautifully crafted black crystal orb encased in an intricate metal framework. As he reached for the artifact, he triggered a series of traps designed to protect it. Narrowly escaping falling debris and hidden blades, Ethan managed to secure the Sentinel. However, the Obsidian Order soon arrived, led by a formidable figure known as Alara. She had been tracking Ethan and was determined to seize the artifact for herself. A high-stakes chase ensued through the mansion and the surrounding grounds, with Ethan using his knowledge of the mansion's layout and the traps he had previously encountered to evade capture. During the chase, Ethan learned that the Sentinel of Shadows had the ability to manipulate shadows and create powerful illusions. Alara used these powers to try and outwit him, creating false paths and misleading him. Ethan had to rely on his wits and the journal's clues to discern reality from illusion. In a dramatic showdown, Ethan and Alara faced off in the mansion's grand hall. The Sentinel's power was at its peak, and the room was filled with shifting shadows and illusions. Ethan managed to use the artifact's power to create a barrier of light, neutralizing the shadows and confronting Alara. With a combination of bravery and clever tactics, Ethan managed to outmaneuver Alara and thwart the Obsidian Order's plans. He used the Sentinel's power to seal the hidden chamber, ensuring that the artifact could not be accessed by those with ill intentions. Ethan returned the Sentinel of Shadows to its resting place, ensuring its safety and preserving the balance between light and darkness. He knew that his adventure had taught him valuable lessons about courage, responsibility, and the importance of protecting powerful forces from falling into the wrong hands. As he looked back at the mansion one last time, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His journey had been more than a quest for a legendary artifact. It had been a test of his character and his ability to rise to the challenge. With the Sentinel safe and the Obsidian Order defeated, Ethan continued his studies of ancient myths, knowing that the world was filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered. 13-year-old Alex was the kind of person everyone liked, but no one really knew. He was always smiling, always making jokes, and never letting anyone see beneath the surface. At school, he was the funny guy, the one who made everyone laugh, but when he went home, the smile would fade, and the weight of everything he was hiding would settle on his shoulders. Alex's parents were going through a messy divorce, and the constant fighting had turned his home into a war zone. The tension was unbearable, but Alex never let it show. He kept up his cheerful act at school, pretending everything was fine. He didn't want to burden his friends with his problems. They all had their own issues to deal with. So, he wore his mask and kept his pain hidden. One day, during lunch, Alex's best friend, Mia, noticed something was off. His jokes seemed forced, and his usual sparkle was missing. She had known Alex for years and could sense that something was wrong. After school, she pulled him aside, away from the crowd, and asked him what was going on. At first, Alex shrugged it off, giving her the usual "I'm fine" routine, but Mia wasn't convinced. She pressed on, telling him that it was okay to talk about what was bothering him. For the first time in a long while, Alex felt the walls he had built around himself start to crack. The mask he wore was slipping, and he didn't know how to stop it. As Mia continued to talk to him, something inside Alex broke. The floodgates opened, and he found himself telling her everything. The fights at home, the fear of losing his family, the pressure of keeping it all together. Mia listened, not interrupting, just letting him get it all out. When he finished, Alex felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his chest. Mia didn't try to fix his problems. she just offered him support, letting him know that he didn't have to face everything alone. Over the next few weeks, Alex started to open up more, not just to Mia, but to his other friends as well. He realized that he didn't have to carry his burdens alone, and that it was okay to let others in. The mask he had worn for so long was still there, but now it wasn't hiding his true self. It was just a part of who he was. In the end, Alex learned that it's okay to be vulnerable, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let others see the real you. 17-year-old Lucas Hernandez was a science prodigy with a fascination for quantum physics. His curiosity often led him to the local university's lab, where he admired the cutting-edge research. One evening, while exploring the lab after hours, he stumbled upon an experimental quantum device, a machine capable of creating and manipulating quantum rifts. It was still in its prototype stage and not yet operational. As Lucas examined the device, an unexpected power surge activated it, creating a small quantum rift that pulled him through. When the rift closed, Lucas found himself in a parallel dimension, a futuristic world where technology and magic seemed to coexist. The landscape was a blend of high-tech cities and mystical realms, and the sky was streaked with neon colors. Lucas soon discovered that this parallel world was under threat from a rogue faction called the Void Syndicate, who sought to harness the quantum rifts for their own nefarious purposes. They wanted to destabilize the dimensions and create chaos across all realities. Lucas realized that he had inadvertently become part of this conflict and decided to use his knowledge to help. In this new world, Lucas met an unlikely ally, Ava, a skilled hacker and rebel leader who had been fighting against the Void Syndicate. She was initially skeptical of Lucas, but soon recognized his expertise as they worked together to gather information on the Void Syndicate's plans. With Ava's help, Lucas learned that the Syndicate planned to open a massive rift that would merge their dimension with others, causing widespread destruction. Lucas and Ava infiltrated the Void Syndicate's headquarters, a heavily guarded fortress with both advanced technology and magical weapons. They used a combination of high-tech gadgets and magical spells to bypass security and gather critical data on the Syndicate's operations. During their mission, they encountered the leader of the Void Syndicate, a formidable figure known as Malachar. Malachar was a master of both technology and dark magic, making him a dangerous adversary. He revealed that he had captured Lucas's counterpart from this dimension, a scientist who had been working on a similar quantum device. Malachar planned to use this scientist's knowledge to complete his plan. Lucas and Ava managed to rescue the scientist and escape the fortress, but they were pursued by Malachar and his minions. The final showdown took place at the core of the Void Syndicate's rift generator, a massive structure that pulsed with dark energy. Lucas used his scientific knowledge to disable the generator, while Ava and her allies fought off the Syndicate's forces. In a climactic battle, Lucas confronted Malachar and managed to outwit him using a combination of quantum physics and quick thinking. With the rift generator destroyed, the dimensional threat was neutralized. The parallel world was saved, and the Void Syndicate was defeated. Lucas was hailed as a hero in this dimension and offered a chance to stay, but he chose to return to his own world. With Ava's help, he activated the quantum device and opened a rift back to his dimension. When he returned, Lucas was filled with a sense of accomplishment and wonder. He had faced unimaginable challenges and had bridged the gap between science and magic. His adventure had not only tested his skills, but had also taught him the importance of courage and teamwork. Jaden was a typical teenager, full of energy, opinions, and a bit of an attitude. He often found himself clashing with his parents, teachers, and even the elderly neighbors who lived down the street. To him, the older generation just didn't get it. They were out of touch, and their advice always felt irrelevant. One day, Jaden's parents asked him to help their elderly neighbor, Mr. Thompson, with his garden. Mr. Thompson was in his 70s, a widower who had lived alone for years. His garden was his pride and joy, but it had become too much for him to manage alone. "Why do I have to help him?" Jaden complained. "He's just some old guy. Can't he hire someone?" His parents exchanged a look. "Jaden, it's important to help others, especially our elders. You might learn something if you give it a chance." Reluctantly, Jaden agreed. The next morning, he trudged over to Mr. Thompson's house, his hands shoved in his pockets. Mr. Thompson greeted him with a warm smile and led him to the garden. At first, Jaden was bored out of his mind. The work was tedious, pulling weeds, trimming bushes, and carrying bags of soil. But as the day wore on, he began to notice how much care Mr. Thompson put into every detail. The older man knew the names of every plant. He knew how much sunlight each one needed and the best way to encourage them to grow. "Why do you care so much about this garden?" Jaden asked during a break, wiping sweat from his brow. Mr. Thompson smiled. He looked out over the rows of flowers and vegetables. "This garden reminds me of my wife. We started it together when we first moved here. She loved gardening, and after she passed, I kept it up in her memory. It's a way of staying close to her." Jaden felt a pang of guilt for his earlier attitude. He hadn't realized how much this garden meant to Mr. Thompson. As the days went by, Jaden found himself looking forward to his time in the garden. He began to appreciate the peacefulness of it, the satisfaction of seeing the plants thrive under their care. More importantly, he enjoyed Mr. Thompson's company. The old man had stories to tell, stories of his youth, stories of his travels, and of the lessons life had taught him. One afternoon, as they were finishing up, Mr. Thompson handed Jaden a small potted plant. "This is for you. It's a young oak tree. With time and care, it'll grow strong and tall." Jaden looked at the plant, then at Mr. Thompson. "Thanks. I'll take good care of it." As Jaden walked home that day, he realized something important. Respecting elders wasn't just about doing what you're told. It was about understanding that they had lived full lives, had experiences and wisdom that could teach him things he wouldn't learn anywhere else. From then on, Jaden made a point to show more respect to his parents, his teachers, and even the elderly neighbors he used to ignore. He knew now that they had more to offer than he had ever imagined. And every time he looked at the young oak tree growing in his yard, he remembered Mr. Thompson and the lesson of the garden. 16-year-old Maya Rivera was known for her brilliant mind and knack for solving puzzles. Her interest in cryptography and coding was more than a hobby, it was a passion. Little did she know that her skills would soon be put to the ultimate test in a high-stakes adventure that would thrust her into the heart of a shadowy conspiracy. It all began on a regular school day when Maya received an anonymous email containing a cryptic code. The email hinted at a major plot involving her city and included a challenge. Decode the message before midnight to prevent a catastrophic event. Intrigued and alarmed, Maya set to work. The code was complex, but her years of practice allowed her to break through the layers of encryption. The decoded message revealed plans for a series of coordinated cyber attacks on the city's infrastructure, aiming to cause widespread chaos. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Maya decided to investigate further. The email contained a clue pointing to an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. She grabbed her backpack, loaded with her laptop, a portable hard drive, and some basic tools, and headed to the factory. Inside the factory, Maya discovered a hidden server room, filled with rows of computers and sophisticated equipment. As she examined the setup, she found evidence of a hacker group known as the Black Code. Their leader, a notorious hacker known only as Cypher, was planning to execute the cyber attacks from this location. Maya knew she had to act fast. She hacked into the Black Code's network to gather more information and discovered the timing and targets of the attacks. But just as she was about to alert the authorities, she heard footsteps behind her. The Black Code's operatives had discovered her presence. A tense chase ensued through the labyrinthine corridors of the factory. Maya used her agility and quick thinking to evade capture, using her hacking skills to disable security cameras and open locked doors. She narrowly escaped several traps set by Cypher's team. Eventually, Maya found her way to Cypher's control center, where he was preparing to execute the attacks. In a dramatic showdown, she confronted Cypher, who was surprised to see a teenager outsmarting his operations. Cypher attempted to overpower her, but Maya's coding skills allowed her to fight back. She used her knowledge of cybersecurity to thwart his attempts to launch the attacks and took control of the main server. As Maya worked to disable the cyber attacks, Cypher tried to escape. Maya managed to outwit him using a clever trick. She trapped him in a virtual maze she had programmed. With the attacks neutralized and Cypher captured, Maya handed over the evidence to the authorities. The city was saved from disaster, and Maya was hailed as a hero. Her bravery and intelligence had prevented a major crisis, and her skills were recognized and celebrated. The experience solidified her passion for cybersecurity and coding, and she decided to pursue a career in the field. Maya's adventure taught her that her talents were not just for solving puzzles, but also for making a real difference. 18-year-old Max had always been a skeptic. Ghosts, haunted houses, and supernatural phenomena were just myths to him, until he moved to the small town of Briarwood with his family. The old house they moved into had a dark reputation. It was said to be haunted by the spirits of its previous owners. Max dismissed the stories as nothing more than local legends, but his friends dared him to investigate, and he couldn't resist the challenge. The house itself was imposing, 3 stories tall with ivy-covered walls and creaky wood floors. Max's room was on the top floor, with a large window that looked out over the overgrown garden. On his first night, as he settled into bed, he heard the house creak and groan in the silence of the night. He rolled his eyes and tried to ignore it, attributing the noises to the house settling. A few nights later, while Max was trying to fall asleep, he heard a soft whispering coming from somewhere in the house. The voices were faint, like murmurs carried by the wind. Curious and slightly unnerved, Max decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and quietly made his way downstairs, following the whispers. The sounds led him to the basement, a place he had avoided since moving in. The basement door was old and heavy, and it creaked ominously as Max opened it. The darkness below seemed to swallow the light from his flashlight. He hesitated but took a deep breath and descended the stairs. The basement was cold and musty, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets and boxes of forgotten belongings. As Max moved further into the basement, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to be coming from a small room at the far end of the basement. Max approached the room, his heart pounding. The door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open with a creak. Inside, the room was empty except for an old rocking chair that seemed to move on its own, swaying back and forth. The whispers were now clear, and Max could make out words, pleas for help and warnings of danger. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and Max's breath fogged in the air. The rocking chair stopped moving, and a shadowy figure appeared in the corner of the room. The figure was translucent and appeared to be a woman in old-fashioned clothing. Her eyes were hollow, and she reached out toward Max with a look of desperate sadness. Max backed away, his flashlight flickering. The whispers grew more frantic, and the shadowy figure began to advance toward him. He turned and fled from the room, up the stairs and out of the basement. He slammed the basement door shut behind him and leaned against it, gasping for breath. Over the next few days, Max tried to avoid the basement, but the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. He did some research on the house's history and discovered that it had belonged to a family who had disappeared mysteriously years ago. The townspeople believed the family had been victims of a tragic event, and their spirits were said to haunt the house. Determined to put an end to the haunting, Max sought the help of a local historian who specialized in paranormal. The historian explained that the spirits were trapped because they had not found peace, and and the only way to help them was to uncover the truth of their fate.
15-year-old Ava had always been fascinated by the legends of Shadow Creek, a secluded area deep within the woods near her town. The stories told of hidden treasures, ancient ruins, and mysterious disappearances. Most people dismissed them as tall tales, but Ava couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth to them. One summer afternoon, with nothing to do and a thirst for adventure, Ava decided it was time to uncover the secrets of Shadow Creek for herself. She packed a small backpack with essentials, water, snacks, a flashlight, and her phone, and set off into the woods. The trail to Shadow Creek was overgrown and winding, barely visible beneath the thick canopy of trees. As she ventured deeper, the sounds of the town faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The air grew cooler and the shadows longer, but Ava pressed on, her curiosity driving her forward. After what felt like hours, she finally reached the edge of the creek. The water was dark and still, reflecting the dense foliage above. Ava felt a shiver of excitement. She was standing in the very place where the legends began. As she explored the area, Ava noticed something unusual. A small weathered stone marker half hidden by vines. Kneeling down, she brushed the dirt away, revealing an inscription in an old, faded script. It was a riddle. Where the shadows fall, the treasure calls. Seek the stone that stands alone. Ava's heart raced. This was it, the clue that could lead her to the legendary treasure. She looked around, trying to make sense of the riddle. Shadows were everywhere, but a stone that stood alone? She hadn't seen anything like that yet. Determined, she followed the creek further upstream, keeping an eye out for anything that matched the description. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the landscape. Just as she was about to turn back, she spotted it. A large solitary stone standing at the top of a small hill, its surface smooth and untouched by time. With renewed energy, Ava climbed the hill and examined the stone. It was taller than she was, with strange carvings that looked like they had been made by someone, or something long ago. She walked around it, looking for any sign of the treasure, but found nothing. Frustrated, Ava sat down on a nearby rock to think. The riddle had to mean something. She closed her eyes, replaying the words in her mind. Where the shadows fall. Then it hit her, the setting sun. The shadows were moving as the sun went down. Maybe the treasure could only be found at a certain time of day. Ava jumped to her feet and watched as the shadow of the stone stretched across the ground. It slowly crept toward the base of a large oak tree nearby. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, the shadow pointed directly at a small patch of disturbed earth. Her heart pounding, Ava hurried over and began digging with her hands. The dirt was loose, as if someone had been there recently. After a few minutes, her fingers brushed against something hard. She pulled it out, revealing a small rusty metal box. Ava's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found a collection of old coins, a map, and a letter. The letter, written in the same old script as the riddle, read, "To the one who finds this, you are the keeper of Shadow Creek's secret. Guard it well, for there are those who would use it for ill. The map will guide you to more than just treasure, if you are brave enough to follow." Ava stared at the map, a new sense of adventure bubbling inside her. Shadow Creek had more secrets to offer, and she was just getting started. With the box safely tucked in her backpack, Ava headed home, her mind racing with possibilities. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Jake, a 16-year-old with a knack for finding trouble, received a mysterious letter in the mail. It had no return address and was sealed with an old wax stamp. Curiosity piqued, Jake tore it open and found a faded map along with a single line of text. "The lost caverns await the brave." Jake had heard stories about the lost caverns, a network of tunnels hidden deep in the mountains that were said to hold unimaginable treasures and dangers. Most people dismissed the tales as myths, but Jake was different. He lived for the thrill of adventure, and this was exactly the kind of challenge he craved. Without wasting a second, Jake grabbed his gear, a flashlight, rope, water, and a small first aid kit, and hopped on his bike, heading toward the mountains. The map was old and hard to read, but Jake's excitement grew with every pedal stroke. After an hour of riding, he reached the base of the mountain. The path ahead was steep and rocky, but Jake was undeterred. He began the climb, using the map to guide him through the dense forest. As he ascended, the air grew cooler, and the trees thinned out, revealing the jagged peaks above. Finally, Jake reached a narrow entrance hidden behind a cluster of boulders. It was almost invisible, just a small crack in the mountain's side, but it matched the markings on the map perfectly. Taking a deep breath, Jake squeezed through the gap and into the darkness beyond. The air inside was damp and cool, and the only sound was the echo of his footsteps. Jake switched on his flashlight, revealing walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols. The tunnel was narrow and winding, leading deeper into the mountain. Jake's heart raced with anticipation. He was on the brink of something incredible. After what felt like hours of navigating the twisting tunnels, Jake came to a large chamber. The walls glittered with crystals, reflecting the light from his flashlight in a dazzling display. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone door, covered in intricate designs. Jake could barely contain his excitement as he approached it. But as he got closer, he noticed something strange. There were no handles, no hinges, no obvious way to open the door. The only clue was a small round indentation in the stone. Jake pulled the map from his pocket and studied it again. There in the corner was a drawing of a key, a round stone disc. Determined, Jake searched the chamber, shining his flashlight into every nook and cranny. Finally, in a small alcove, he found it, a stone disc covered in dust. He carefully lifted it and placed it into the indentation on the door. With a loud rumble, the door began to slide open, revealing a dark passage beyond. Jake's hands shook with excitement as he stepped through the doorway. The passage led to another chamber, this one filled with ancient artifacts, golden statues, jeweled weapons, and piles of coins. But what caught Jake's eye was a large ornate chest in the center of the room. He approached it cautiously, half expecting a trap, but nothing happened. The chest was unlocked, and when Jake lifted the lid, he found it filled with scrolls and books, maps, diaries, and records from explorers long gone.
18-year-old Mia Chun was a tech-savvy student with a keen interest in robotics and artificial intelligence. She spent most of her time tinkering with gadgets and coding, dreaming of creating something revolutionary. Her world turned upside down when she accidentally intercepted a confidential message on a government frequency while testing a new signal decoder. The message spoke of an imminent threat involving the high-tech, experimental device known as the Phoenix Protocol. This device, activated, had the potential to disable global communication networks, plunging the world into chaos. The message also revealed that the device was hidden in a secure facility located in a remote part of the country. Determined to prevent a global catastrophe, Mia decided to investigate. She packed her gear, including her laptop, various tools, and a portable drone, and set off for the facility. The journey took her through rugged terrain and dense forests. Her technical skills helped her navigate and overcome obstacles. Upon reaching the facility, Mia discovered that it was heavily guarded by both human and robotic security systems. Using her tech expertise, she managed to hack into the facility's security network. She created a temporary diversion, allowing her to slip past the guards and enter the building. Inside, Mia faced a series of high-tech security measures, including biometric scanners and laser grids. She used her drone to scout ahead, mapping out the facility's layout. Her coding skills helped her bypass digital locks and disable security systems, allowing her to move deeper into the facility. Eventually, Mia reached the control room where the Phoenix Protocol was housed. The device was a massive, intricate machine. It had multiple layers of encryption protecting its core. Mia had to solve complex puzzles and decode encrypted messages to access the device's main control room. As she worked to deactivate the Phoenix Protocol, the facility's alarm systems were triggered. A team of elite operatives was dispatched to capture her. Mia's heart raced as she continued her work, knowing that time was running out. In a tense confrontation, Mia faced off against the lead operative, a skilled fighter named Agent Lewis. Using her knowledge of the facility's layout and quick reflexes, Mia managed to evade capture and keep Agent Boss at bay while she worked to disable the force. With seconds to spare, Mia completed the deactivation sequence, neutralizing the Phoenix protocol. She prevented the global blackout. She quickly made her escape through an emergency exit, narrowly avoiding capture by the others. Back in the safety of her home, Mia received a message of thanks from an anonymous source, confirming that her actions had prevented a major crisis. Her bravery and technical prowess had averted disaster and protected countless lives. The experience solidified Mia's passion for technology and her desire to use her skills for the greater good. She continued her studies with renewed determination. She knew that her talents had made a real difference. The Phoenix Protocol had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and she emerged as a hero, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.
Emma, a 19-year-old aspiring filmmaker, had always dreamed of making a horror movie that would terrify audiences. When she stumbled upon an abandoned movie theater in a forgotten part of town, she knew she had found the perfect location. The theater, once a grand place filled with laughter and excitement, had been closed for decades, shrouded in mystery and whispers of a tragic fire that had claimed several lives during screening. Emma, determined to create something truly haunting, gathered her small crew and began filming. The theater was a relic of a bygone era, with torn velvet seats, crumbling walls, and a thick layer of dust covering everything. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the silence was oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. As they set up their equipment, strange things began to happen. The lights, which had been rigged to work despite the theater's age, would flicker and go out without explanation. Their cameras would malfunction, capturing static or bizarre, distorted images. Emma brushed it off as technical issues, refusing to let anything derail her project. But then, the whispers started. At first, they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the creaking of the old building. But as the days went on, they grew louder, more distinct. It was as if voices were trying to communicate, trapped between the walls of the theater. The crew became uneasy, and some wanted to leave, but Emma insisted on continuing. She was convinced that the eerie atmosphere would only add to the authenticity of the film. One night, while reviewing the day's footage, Emma noticed something strange. In the background of one of the scenes, she saw a figure standing in the shadows, barely visible but unmistakably there. She paused the video and zoomed in, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure was that of a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face pale and expressionless. But what sent chills down her spine was that no one on her crew had seen them during filming. Determined to uncover the mystery, Emma began researching the theater's history in greater detail. She discovered that the man she had seen was a projectionist who had worked at the theater in the 1940s. He had perished in the fire that had destroyed the theater, trapped in the projection room as the flames consumed the building. According to the accounts, his body was never recovered, and some believed his spirit still haunted the theater, searching for the audience's influence. Emma, both terrified and fascinated, decided to continue filming, hoping to capture more evidence of his supernatural presence. As they shot the final scenes, the atmosphere of the theater grew more intense. The temperature dropped, and the whispers turned into cries of anguish. The crew members were on edge, and some even reported seeing fleeting shadows out of the corner of their eyes. On the last day of shooting, as Emma directed the final scene, the projector in the old booth suddenly whirred to life, casting an eerie glow across the empty view. The ancient film reel began to play, showing images of the audience from that fateful night. The ghosts of the past watched silently, their eyes hollow and empty, as the flames began to flicker on the screen. Panic swept through the crew as they realized they were not alone. The temperature plummeted, and the cries of the lost souls echoed through the theater. Emma, frozen in fear, felt a cold hand press her shoulder. She turned captured was lost, and the theater was soon boarded up once again, as if it had never been disturbed. Sophia, a 19-year-old dancer, had just moved into a small apartment in an old building close to her dance studio. The building had an unsettling history, with previous tenants leaving suddenly and mysteriously. Sophia, focused on her career, dismissed the stories as mere gossip and was excited to start her new life. The first few nights in the apartment were quiet, but soon, strange things began to happen. At night, she would hear soft, melodic music coming from somewhere within the walls. It was faint, like an old music box playing a haunting lullaby. Sophia found it odd, but assumed it was just one of the neighbors. She tried to ignore it, but the music persisted, growing louder each night. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, Sophia returned home exhausted. As she lay in bed, the music started again. Only this time, it was accompanied by the sound of light footsteps. The steps were soft, like a child's, pacing back and forth above her ceiling. She knew there was no one living in the apartment above hers, as it had been vacant for months. Curiosity got the better of her, and the next day, she decided to investigate. She made her way to the apartment above, finding the door slightly ajar. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and as she stepped inside, she was greeted by an eerie silence. The apartment was empty, save for an old, broken mirror propped against the wall, a tattered ballet costume hanging from her muscle leg. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine as she approached the mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, but something was off. The room behind her in reflection was not the empty apartment she stood in. Instead, it was a grand ballroom, dimly lit, with shadowy figures dancing slowly to the haunting melody that had been playing in her apartment. Mesmerized, she reached out to touch the mirror. As her fingers brushed the cold glass, the reflection rippled like water, and suddenly, she was pulled into the ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of roses and something else, something rotten. The dancers were not what they seemed. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow, and their movements mechanical, as if they were marionettes being controlled by an unseen force. Sophia tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. Her feet began to move on their own, joining the macabre dance. Panic set in as she realized she was trapped, forced to dance endlessly with the lifeless figures around her. The music grew louder, more frantic, and she could feel her energy draining from her step. Time lost all meaning as she danced through the night, her legs growing heavy, her vision dim. Just as she thought she would collapse, the music stopped abruptly, and the dancers rose. The grand ballroom dissolved around her, and she found herself back in her apartment, lying on the floor, drenched in sweat, and gasping for breath. But something was different. When she looked around, she saw that the old, broken mirror from the apartment above was now in her living room, propped against the wall. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't just her. It was the reflection of the ballroom. And in it, she could see the shadowy figures watching her, waiting for the next dance. No matter what she did, she couldn't get rid of the mirror. Each time she tried to move it or cover it, it would reappear in the same spot, the shadowy figures always there, just out of sight, but always present. In the heart of a desolate and isolated small town, a mysterious event occurs. Every single resident disappears overnight, leaving behind only their empty homes and abandoned belongings. The town, once a bustling community, is now eerily quiet. The only sound is the wind whistling through the empty streets. Enter Evelyn, a seasoned journalist in her late 30s, who is sent to investigate this strange phenomenon. Evelyn, known for her unflinching pursuit of the truth, arrives in the town with a small film crew. As they begin documenting the ghost town, they discover that something far more sinister is at play. Strange occurrences begin almost immediately. Unsettling noises echo through the empty streets at night. And the crew members start experiencing vivid, terrifying hallucinations that feel all too real. Evelyn, while reviewing footage, notices that shadows in the background seem to move independently, as if they are alive. As the crew digs deeper, they uncover the town's dark past, a secret society that once operated in the shadows, conducting rituals to bind their spirits to the town in exchange for eternal life. However, the ritual went wrong, trapping the townsfolk in a liminal space between life and death. They exist as echoes, caught in the silence, desperate